Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to League Analysis. I'm Handygamer, and in this fourth and last part of my draft analysis for the semifinals between World Elite and Samsung, I will obviously be taking a look into the very last game between those two teams and once again share my opinion, share my thoughts on the draft process and why some of these teams managed to get to their draft priorities, why others didn't quite execute during the draft as well as they could have. Now, obviously, World Elite has shown a preference for team fighting compositions, sometimes even just all-in compositions. For example, during the second game, they were going for rather aggressive kind of playstyle. But it's always depending on their jungle picks. If they get the Jordan, they will try to play aggressive. If they don't, they will play more of a 1-3-1 style. So, yeah, let's take a look if they actually get the Jarvan. On the opposite side, Samsung has been playing the 1-3-1 throughout the last two games, and they were looking to only get into those fights that they actually wanted to take part in, which is why they were obviously tending towards the Gragas and banning away the Janna so that they can choose when to fight and when not to fight if they were on the red side. Now, obviously, they are on the blue side in this draft, and now let's see what they actually change. And they end up banning away the Gragas that they picked previously. I think they kind of figured that if World Elite have the Jarvan available again, they might go for it. But at the point where they were banning away the Gragas, Sejuani was still left open. So by banning the Gragas, they were obviously in a position where they could have first picked the Jarvan, who has a rather strong matchup against the Sejuani. And Team World Elite obviously say, okay, no, we don't want to give you the Jarvan, and we don't want to give you the Sejuani either. We ban the Sejuani, and given your previous priorities, we don't think that you actually will go for the Jarvan themselves or yourself. And that's why we end up in a scenario where a Jarvan is left open, but the Gragas isn't. And now it's kind of interesting to see how these teams adapt. Obviously, we always have the red side Janna ban and the blue side Lulu ban that has been happening almost throughout the entirety of this series. And I think only Samsung Galaxy in the very first game. No, I think even then they did ban the Janna. Like, both teams don't want this champ in these games. They know how strong of a pick it is, and I think the Lulu ban and the Xayah ban were somewhat of a result of that. Obviously, the Xayah to just deny the Xayah Rakan combination for World Elite, which they were running previously in the first game. And since now Galio is left open because World Elite only have two bans and they have to kind of use one on the Janna. They obviously have to ban the Kalista. I think it's pretty ridiculous to assume that they would leave that one open. And with the Gragas ban, you kind of force the Sejuani ban or the Galio ban. And as I mentioned, if you leave open the Sejuani, Samsung will have the preferred jungle matchup. Instead, now they have the Galio. World Elite say, okay, we once again default back to the Taric, and I'm actually still baffled that Taric was picked each and every game on the red side. Like at various stages of the game or of the draft, but I'm honestly at a loss here as to why you would go for the Taric only on the red side. Yeah, but maybe someone in the audience has better understanding of the meta in that sense and can teach me a thing or two. Now, they also log in the Kog'Maw. Mystic, obviously one of the strongest AD carries in the tournament. The Chinese carries as a whole have really been showing up. at least during the group stage and the quarterfinals. And I think it's pretty obviously a strong pick for him, and it has been banned against him twice by Samsung Galaxy throughout the series, so they know what he's capable of, and I think World Elite now seizes the opportunity to lock in the Kog'Maw, also taking it away from Samsung, who obviously might also run the Kog'Maw if they were given the Galio to protect it. Instead, after Kog'Maw being locked in, Samsung go for the Varus and the Rakan. Varus, obviously, a strong pick for Ruler throughout the series. He just sticks with it because it has been working. I think he's been feeling comfortable on it. And now they also picked the Rakan. Probably for the bot lane matchup. I really don't have as much of a strong opinion on the supports right now, because to me most of them are art and sensor bots, and they only serve the purpose of assisting in engaging or disengaging, and it really doesn't matter that much what kind of tool you're using for that. On the opposite side now, we see the Jarvan locked in again for Condi. I think World Elite simply feel really comfortable playing that champion. It obviously, at least from my perspective, kind of suits their style. They want to go for the fights, they want to force the fights. That's why they go for the Jarvan, because he locks down a carry if he doesn't have an escape, and obviously Varus, if his flash is down, is stuck inside the Cataclysm. Cataclysm has a much smaller, shorter cooldown than the flash from Varus, so you have lots of timing windows where you can actually go for those fights if the enemy opens himself up to get caught. Now, let's talk about the bans, because I think most of them are pretty similar to what we've seen 2 games ago, where Samsung was also on the blue side, World Elite also on the red side. Again, we see the Jace banned by the red side team. That's been happening in almost every single game of these series. And we see once again World Elite banning away the Kha'Zix. And I think this Kha'Zix ban is really debatable, because, as I argued 2 videos ago, leaving Kha'Zix open in the second game, where you were 1-0 up in the series and could afford going or checking if Samsung had something prepared in terms of the Kha'Zix, would have enabled you to potentially open up a ban later on in the series. If Ambition isn't going for the Kha'Zix or isn't performing too well on it, you don't have to ban it away in this specific game. And I think that's where the draft kind of comes back to hurt them. Obviously, the Gragas has been banned, and at this point, every single trifecta champion, as I call them, is gone because you've locked in the Jarvan. But I feel like you could have, for example, pinched the top lane pool a bit more, banning away the Gnar and going for a tank yourself. For example, Cho'Gath would have been a very strong option here, because you could have banned away the Jace first, the Shen ban would have most likely followed, then you ban away the Gnar, and there's only like the Trundle left for the Cho'Gath to deal with the Cho'Gath himself. And I think Cho'Gath at this point is one of the strongest picks in the meta, because he always has threat on backline targets that don't have flash, and he's pretty safe in lanes where he doesn't have to face a ranged matchup. Now, however, things go the way they do. Malzahar is once again banned, this time by Samsung. They had been playing the Malzahar before. World Elite had banned the Malzahar against them, but now, since they have already locked in their mid laner, Samsung want to take away the Malzahar from GA, and instead GA decides to go for the Taliyah, trying to copy what Crown had been doing in the previous game, or in general on that champion. I don't think Talia is that much of a strong pick against Galio. I think if you want to match the roaming potential of Galio's ultimate, you shouldn't go for the Talia, but instead go for the Ryze. But I don't know what champions she had practiced coming into the series, but just from, for example, judging Zhao performance against Faker, I think that he showed that Ryze has a lot of potential against the Galio if played properly. And I think Ryze would have been somewhat of a better choice here, at least just from my point of view, because, well, I don't know, Talia can't really pressure Galio at any stage of the game, and her roaming isn't like that much better than the Ryze, so I don't see any value in picking her over Ryze if Galio has already been locked in. Now, if you think back to my SKT versus RNG series, where I was also discussing the Lee Sin, I was pretty vocal about how I thought he was a bad pick when they locked him in the 5th game, RNG that is. In this 4th game of the series, I, however, have a different opinion, simply because the team compositions are totally different than they were in the 5th game between SKT and RNG. Because now locking in this Lee Sin actually makes a lot of sense to me. World Elite have by now only shown one frontliner that isn't particularly strong in the frontline, that you can also still disengage with your kick, just like the Gragas explosive cask. And it's also a very strong early game jungler. Obviously, it also comes down to execution, what you're actually going to do in the early game. SKT played a very aggressive early game with the Jarvan in the 5th game against RNG, while RNG weren't really prepared for that. Here, ambition, I think, is pretty fine on the Lee Sin. You're going for 1-3-1 anyways, you already have the Galio, and picking Lee Sin simply to disengage any potential fights is perfectly fine. RNG obviously were looking to use the Lee Sin more as an engage potential and also as a potential frontliner, but for Samsung, who also lock in the Gnar at the very same part of the draft, they don't need Lee Sin to be that much of a frontliner. So yeah, I think it's okay. You add some more physical damage to your team composition. You also overall have a bit more damage, which you are lacking if you're running the Galio in the mid lane. And I think at this point it's fine to go for the Lee Sin. Obviously, the Gnar still the strongest blind pick for the top side at this stage, as a terrific matchup against almost any top laner that's still left. It also offers split pushing potential and still some form of teamfight presence if you really want to go for it. Obviously, the teamfight presence is much more limited in comparison to the split pushing potential, because there you have timing windows that you have to play around again that always make your team composition harder to execute. So using Gnar as a split pusher is, I think, the ideal way of using him. If you're picking Gnar just for the team fights, I think there are better options available to you. And that's also, I think, why split push top laners such as Cuvee, such as Huni, have had better performances on the Gnar than, say, tank top lane role players such as Letme, who are still looking to use him in the team fights. Now, the very last pick is the Cannon. Obviously, we had Cuvee on Cannon in the first game of the series. He wasn't really doing too much. At that point, I already said that I don't like Cannon in comparison to a tank top laner if you have the choice. Now, obviously, you drafted yourself into a position where the enemy can lock in Gnar, where, for example, you could have simply locked in the Gnar instead of the Talia and taken the Talia last rotation because no one else would have picked it away from you. you are ending up in a scenario where you are picking the Gnar into the Ken into the Gnar. Might work out early on in the game, but at later stages of the game, it just doesn't. Ken has not enough damage to threaten Gnar in split burst scenario, so you're stuck in a situation where you have to look for fights. Obviously, Zyrene's teamfight breakdown is just insane. He's spot on and at highlighting why this actually is, at least from my perspective, one of the greatest games in this world so far. At least in terms of execution, because Samsung Galaxy simply outshine World Elite. But that's also mostly due to their draft. They have all the tools that they need. They have a winning split push scenario in the top side. They have a mid lane matchup where at later stages of the games, Crown with his Galio will also win the matchup, and they have a 3-man team for manning the mid lane that is not only able to wave clear with the Varus, but also very able to disengage with the Lee Sin. They can also try to pick up anyone that's falling behind in terms of rotations on World Elite's side. Also, if you remember in the previous game, World Elite were running the Karma and the Orianna that actually offer speed boosts for rotations. Now you only have the Taliyah with her wall to actually help out on a different side lane, or like go for walling plays in the center of the map. But I don't think we see GA go for that too often, simply because Samsung know exactly how not only to play Taliyah, but also how to play against her. They position smartly, they have the proper vision setup, and thus the hard part for World Elite is actually getting to team fights. They have somewhat limited potential in terms of disengaging from team fights, but this shouldn't be a problem because Samsung obviously aren't really looking for team fights, even though they could. They have enough combo potential if, say, Ambition were more of an aggressive playmaking Lee Sin than a protective one. He could have gone for insect plays with Galio follow up onto him and then Gnar teleporting in when going for a Gnar. But I think that's also the wrong approach for Samsung, because they have overall a rather low damage composition, especially in terms of magic damage, which enables Condi to be more of a tank frontliner than he actually should be allowed to be in this kind of draft, because World Elite only have him as a frontliner. They can only go for team fights while the Cosmic Radiance is available. If it's down, they simply lack the frontline, and Condi, even though he might engage, could just get kicked out, or what Ambition obviously does is kick out 957 when he goes for any flank attempt. So yeah, I think Samsung Galaxy have drafted themselves all the proper tools they need to deal with the Team World Elite's team composition. The Ken itself, I think, is meant to be a lane counter pick for the early game against the Gnar. I don't see what else he's gonna achieve throughout the series or throughout the game. And I think the win conditions for World Elite are much harder to achieve than for Samsung, simply because Samsung can always apply pressure in top and mid side, such that World Elite can't really go bot lane and snowball, which is actually what their team comp kind of wants to do. So yeah, as long as Samsung play the early game defensively enough, get in on the bot side, and get enough items on their mid and top side, they should be doing a-okay. They should be doing fine, and I think that's why Samsung, to me, has pretty much the better draft here compared to World Elite. So yeah, that's it for me for my series about Samsung versus World Elite. Thanks for watching. I'll be doing a last video sometime tonight where I will be giving my prediction in terms of draft for the series between Samsung and SKT. I think this is or has the potential to be the greatest World Championship final we've seen so far. Obviously, last year was a big surprise that it went for 5 games. Now we have two teams that are pretty similar in terms of style, and the draft's going to be amazing. So I really look forward to doing that. If you want to check back, feel free to do so. Thanks for tuning in, and I see you guys in my next video.